Evening, ladies and gents, how you doing? There was a great piece in The Spectator today, which I read, and I was flabbergasted when I got to the foot of the article, because I had heard whisperings of the globalist sociopaths going after yet another populist leader in Europe, but I hadn't actually realised that it had culminated in a genuine attempt to lock Marine Le Pen up and then ban her from standing because she's apparently popular. Because remember, if you're right of Chairman Mao, and you're extremely popular with the electorate, so they vote you into power, that's not democracy, no. It's only democracy if you agree with the likes of Keir Starmer and Justin Trudeau. If you're popular and you're not a left-wing activist, well, that's beyond the pale. Then you're a populist, and then it's a bad thing. Alright, so you know the equation, right? Popular, left-wing, good. Popular when right-wing, populist. Therefore, fascist. Easy, innit? The piece is by Gavin Mortimer and it says banning Marine Le Pen from politics would be a grave mistake. The standout part of it is this. Paris prosecutors last week recommended that Marine Le Pen be jailed and banned from public office for 5 years. The court also wants similar sentences for 24 members of the party who, along with Le Pen, are accused of misusing public funds. Yeah, the very definition of trumped up charges, because have you seen the random shite that our leaders spend public funds on? It's unbelievable. I always use it, but Nigerian Spice Girls, alright? If our leaders can pay for Nigerian Spice Girls and not be prosecuted for misusing public funds, might I suggest this is trumped up charges as usual, and the globalist sociopaths are simply looking to criminalise anyone who disagrees with their stupid, infantile, naive, destructive worldview. Yeah, sounds like it, but let's have a read, shall we? Essentially, the lunatics that rule the world with an iron fist want to lock you up if you disagree with them. Well, we knew this was coming, didn't we? The dirty, lying, slimy ratbag prosecutor accuses Le Pen of using money intended for EU parliamentary aids to instead pay staff who worked for the party between 2009 and 2016. The defence's argument is that it's hard to differentiate between what constitutes EU work and party work, as the two often overlap. The judges will study the evidence and a verdict is expected in early 2025. So France has a parliament and the EU has a parliament. And when it suits them, they want to just draw a line in the sand and say, oh, this has got nothing to do with French policies, this is just EU policies. Even though France is in the EU, and by definition, almost everything that's discussed in the EU Parliament is going to affect events in France, isn't it? And you know for a fact that this type of thing is happening with every party in France and probably every country that's in the EU. And these crooked prosecutors are just stitching up, as usual, stitching up a populist candidate because they have the wrong opinions. It's blatantly obvious. Just like Trump. Trump's case, when you really got into that, was truly preposterous. Deutsche Bank didn't make any complaint about him, but a far-left prosecutor decided to move ahead with the case. This is the felony they keep talking about. I can sum it up in 2 sentences. They say he committed fraud by overinflating the value of his properties, but everybody does it, and the banks know everybody does it, so they factor that into the decisions before they give people a loan. And Deutsche Bank said he didn't do anything. We knew he was exaggerating because that's what everybody does, and we gave him a loan because he'd already took 15 loans out with us in the previous 30 years, and he always paid them back with interest. So it's trumped up charges. Ironic that they all seem to start with Trump, but it's trumped up charges across the Western world because, as we know, globalist sociopaths like Klaus Schwab have got the talons into everyone that's on board with the project. Trudeau and Starmer and all the rest of them. They all hang out in Davos, and when they thought it was going to be popular, they were happy to concede the fact. Klaus Schwab, let's discuss that one. The Great Reset, right? It's often called a conspiracy theory. But you and I, dear listeners, the people that actually pay attention because we don't get all of our news off the BBC, are well aware that that was what they called their own movement. It's even on Wikipedia. But the mainstream media is just hoping that you won't check that far, so they just call it a conspiracy theory and make out as if anybody who talks about said reset is some sort of raving lunatic, tinfoil hat wearing, Elvis is still alive, riding about the Highlands with Lord Lucan on the Loch Ness Monster, that type of nonsense. It's ludicrous. It's on Wikipedia. In fact, let's have a look. The Great Reset is an economic recovery plan that was drawn up by the WEF in response to the pandemic. The project was launched in June 2020 and a video featuring Prince Charles was released to mark its launch. The initiative's stated aim was to facilitate rebuilding from the global crisis in a way that prioritises sustainable development. Klaus Schwab described 3 core components of the Great Reset: creating a stakeholder economy and building in a resilient, equitable and sustainable way. Yeah, all the buzzwords. So that quote that Mark Stein popularised, "You will own nothing and you will be happy," that happened. Essentially, they called it the Great Reset, made pamphlets called the Great Reset, made a video called the Great Reset, and gave a speech called the Great Reset, and they even wrote a book about it. And it was only when the general public heard what they were saying and went, "What? You're going to own everything and we're going to own nothing?" And a Teutonic twat with no sense of humour and a Dr. Evil Taylor are just going to lock us all in cupboards and feed us cricket paste. Yeah, I don't think that sounds like a good idea, thanks. And then when the masses turned against these lunatics and said, "Hang on, that sounds awful, ram it where the sun don't shine," all of a sudden the BBC and Channel 4 and the mainstream media started saying, "Great Reset, pfft, conspiracy theory." Conspiracy theory, no one ever said any of that. As usual, gaslighting on a colossal scale. Anyway, back to the story at hand. Obviously, it's interesting because they're going to try and lock everyone up, right? They're going to lock you up for tweeting and they're going to lock right-wing leaders up for disagreeing with Klaus. How very German. Le Pen described the prosecutor's recommendation as excessive, and some of her political opponents agreed. Gerald Darmin, a former Minister of the Interior, said it would be deeply shocking if Marie Le Pen were deemed ineligible. "Let us not be afraid of democracy and avoid widening even further the gap between the elites and the vast majority of our fellow citizens." Le Pen was probably not surprised by the prosecutor's demands that she be sent to prison and banned from standing. Early on in the trial, she lashed out at the Brussels blob, which she says has been after her party for years. Yeah, it has been. The two-tier justice thing, it's not just Keir, it's everybody of his ilk, everybody of his political stripe. They will lock you up for disagreeing. David Starkey was saying it years ago. He was like, they will lock you in the gulag if they can. Of course they will. The last few years have proved it. When they mention words like equity, what they mean is, our ideology tells us that the masses in Western countries are evil. They're bad people and they don't deserve any justice at all. We only look out for one group, and that's the group that's on the victim pyramid. And everybody else can get locked up for anything. Talking, disagreeing, telling jokes, whatever. And heaven forbid any leader like Trump or Le Pen or Farage or anybody else that actually ends up being popular with the masses. Because when you're popular with the masses, that's a check in the box for evil. So off to the nick you go. Stick them in the slammer and we're doing a good thing. Because we've been consumed by a toxic ideology that melts your brain cells. And as you're locking people up for no reason, convinced you're the good guy while you're doing it. But that's just my opinion. If you think Marine Le Pen's definitely done something wrong, it's well dodgy. And all the rest of the politicians in France and all across Europe, they're definitely not, discussing things or using European money because they've got confused, because there's 2 parliaments ruling any single country in the EU. If it sounds well dodgy and you think she's definitely done something wrong, but it's just kind of weird because nobody left-wing ever seems to get prosecuted for these type of things. If you think it's totally fine, let me know in the comments so I can flag the comment and commit the name to memory of someone who would lose a pub quiz to a bucket of snot. Alright, thanks for watching and I'll see you all tomorrow. Alright, take it easy. Toodle pip. Cheers.